Hi everybody. Welcome to the Community Compost Depot. This is a neighborhood drop-off compost access site, and we also compost in the back. So what I'm going to do is show you both what we do here, and we'll have a few workstations where you can have some hands-on experience in handling some of the materials in composting. And we'll break up into a few groups, and there's a few different styles of composting that we can look at. And what I hope you get out of this is both be inspired to do composting on your own or join a composting program that are in a lot of the neighborhoods now in the Providence area, and start composting, collecting your food scraps, saving them, getting them to a composter, and then producing that compost to grow food. So one of the motivations for doing this is to reduce waste. We produce about a half a pound, so about 1/4 of a kilogram of waste, food waste every day, every person. So that's over 150, 180 pounds of waste, food waste every year that we all produce per person. And if we all are able to collect that and compost it, that reduces how much waste goes into our trash, and how much of that material gets to the landfill. That material is useful when we have food scraps, that food that we're not eating, and we set it aside. We don't throw it in our trash, but set it aside. We can use that to make compost in a very simple manner, using very simple methods that's very similar to a recipe that you'd use in the kitchen. So certain proportions of materials, we use both the food scraps and we mix that with the leaves. So this is a perfect time of year with the leaves falling on the ground. You can see them everywhere. These leaves are valuable in mixing with the food scraps to create the right blend, just like if you were making a bread or baking something and you have the right proportion of ingredients. You blend these together to make the compost pile that then the microbes, the biological part, will break down. They decompose into the compost over a certain period of time. Now, we do this under controlled conditions, so we manage the entire process, and we'll show you how we do it and how you can do this at home as well using simple tools like a pitchfork or a shovel or something to turn the compost. And we'll show you how we proportion out the material so you can get an idea of how to do this at home. And you'll also see some of the bins we use that are very simple pieces of equipment that contain the material and allow you to control that process. So let me start here. We have this drop-off site that members of our community who are part of our program, they all get a bucket. Let me see. One second. So people who are part of our program will get a 5-gallon pail that has a cover, and they can take this home, fill it up with their food scraps throughout the week or say 2 weeks, fill the bucket, and then they bring that bucket here and they can drop it off in one of these bins. Now this is just a regular bin, regular recycle bin, but it's perfect for collecting food scraps. These are engineered to keep pests out and to keep the food scraps in. They're very durable and they have wheels so we can easily move them. So people drop off their food scraps here throughout the week, periodically, usually once a day, sometimes every other day. We come and take these bins to the back where we have our composter. The drop-off site for the community access is open 24/7, so people can come here at their convenience. They don't have to pay for dropping off their food scraps. We've run our program as 100% donations. We are a nonprofit, so we want to make sure everyone has access to composting, so anyone can join our program and anyone can drop off food scraps. We have simple instructions. Anything that goes through your kitchen that doesn't get eaten can go in the bucket. So any type of food scrap can go in here. That includes vegetables, it includes meat, cheese, bread, dairy, even oils, any type of leftovers, even food that's spoiled or moldy. It's all okay, it can all go in the bucket. And we are able to take material that might be a soupy mess. If, say, you collect your food scraps and it sits at home and starts to rot in the bucket, and maybe you forgot about it to drop it off, and you think, oh no, I can't drop off that, it's okay. We'll take anything because we can convert that into the compost. And I'll show you the system that we do that. In theory, any paper products are okay. And if it's not coated, paper plates that aren't coated, those are great, those are fine. We have some issues with some of the processed papers that have chemicals in them. So we do have to be careful, but for the most part, if it's brown paper, it's perfectly fine. So toilet paper rolls, yes. Paper towel rolls, yes, those are all fine. Paper plates, most paper plates are okay, but sometimes we have to be careful because they put coatings on them. But if you can tell that it absorbs a little bit of the food and stains, that's actually good. That means it doesn't have the coating that could be a problem in the compost. So all of that material will break down. We do have, if you join our program, we provide instructions, which is basically a list of what can go in the bucket. We have our old sign, which is kind of faded, but it still has a list of those materials. We also have, we have instructions. We also have this in Spanish, but we have instructions on what can go in the bucket. What I'd like to do is I'd like to move to the back of the yard. We have one training station here that will break a group up. They can practice adding food scraps and leaves. I'll show you how we do it. And we have another station right here that shows this type of composter that also has a setup so that you can store your leaves, and that also keeps that composter insulated. For composting, when we have food scraps, the food scraps are wet, they're dense, and they're biologically active. That means things like to eat them, just like us. Those other things that like to eat the food scraps, they can be bugs, they can be mold, they can be rats, anything else that's living will want to eat the food scrap. So we need to set up the right conditions for composting so that the right organisms break down those food scraps. And the way to balance it out with your food scraps is with leaves. So this is really important. For every bucket of food scraps, so if we have 1 bucket of food scraps, we need 3 buckets of leaves. So 3 buckets of leaves to 1 bucket of food scraps. And that's the recipe. Now, you need to blend them together. And the best way to do that is inside a container. the best order of ingredients, the best order to do this in is to fill it up with leaves first. Add the leaves first and then blend the food scraps into the leaves. This is the best way to get a nice compost pile. And that is how we do it here. It seems really simple, because it is. What makes it challenging is the timing. We have to remember to check the compost periodically. Every couple of days, at least twice a week, we need to check the compost pile, and we might need to mix it again. We might need to add a little more leaves, and we need to make sure that it's breaking down, and we need to see with our eyes that no pests are getting in there, and by that, mainly rats. No rats. We don't want rats in there. Okay? Now, when you start a compost pile, we have the 3 buckets of leaves and we have 1 bucket of food scraps. That's day 1. Day 2, day 3, we have more food scraps. Add more leaves, add the food scraps, and you can keep building your pile.
When do we start doing the pile?
Yes, you can keep building your pile until you decide to stop. Now, when do you decide to stop? When the bin is full, yeah? Or maybe you need to stop because you want compost soon and you want that to break down. So when we stop adding food scraps, we keep mixing it until all the food scraps break down and we don't recognize anything in there as food. Then you can let it sit, and you can even dump it into a pile and start a new pile. If you have a big family, or if you want to make a lot of food scraps, get 2 bins, 2 composters, start 1 composter, build up that pile until it's full, and then stop adding to that pile and start a second compost pile and start building that one up in the second bin. While you're building up that second pile, that first pile will break down. That's your strategy. So remember, the right proportions, 3 parts leaves, 1 part food scraps, blend them together. Each time you add food scraps, add leaves first, add the food scraps into the leaves. Build your pile until it's big enough or you need to stop. Keep mixing that until it breaks down enough. When there's no more food scraps in there, your pile is safe to set aside to cure. Now you want to let it sit for at least 3 months, ideally for 1 year. If you don't have that much time, that's okay. You can still use it after 3 months. So let's do this. I'd like to show you the process. Open to the ground, and yep, so underneath is open to the ground, but you can see this has hardware cloth. The hardware cloth is underneath. I put that on there. They sell these through the city of Providence. You can get one of these. About $30 or $40. And it has a cover that locks in place. so that something can't get in. But underneath, something could dig underneath and get underneath. So I modify it by adding the hardware cloth. The rats can't chew through that. So, and I can show how we do that at another time, but
Yeah.
yep, you can contact me at your personal time. Surrounding this is just a fence that I built. So this is a fenced-in structure that allows you to store your leaves, so they're convenient. It also acts as insulation, so it holds in the heat in your composter. Yesterday, I added leaves to this bin, and I put in some food scraps, and I mixed it. You can see that heat coming up. Yep. So that's one day. Yep. Right? And by what?
Almost smells good.
It almost smells good.
Smells like food.
That's right. Isn't that interesting? Is it? What's really interesting about composting? When you add the food scraps and you get that heated up, the microorganisms that break it down, they actually have a nice pleasant smell. Earthy smell. If the food scraps are rotten, if they have a smell, sometimes it'll smell a little bit for a couple days, but it goes away pretty quickly. And you just end up with a nice earthy smell. And as you continue to add food scraps and build that pile, it absorbs those bad smells, and the process is really pleasant, and it's easy to manage. So we have, this is one type of mixer. This has these wings in there that you push down, and it goes in like that and then pulls up. This is one way to mix it. And you can see some of that, the steam coming up.
Yes. Do you have to do that all the time? Like
When you get this started
a basement.
and you keep adding a little bit of leaves, a little bit of food scraps, it's just like having a campfire. If you add a little bit of wood, it'll keep that fire going. So if you add leaves and you add food scraps, it'll keep this cooking. And you can keep it cooking as long as you want. Now this isn't a big bin, so maybe after a month it'll get filled up, but you can certainly keep that cooking when it's surrounded by this fencing and has the leaves. It holds in that heat and it'll cook that whole time, as long as you're adding the leaves and the food scraps. When I make the compost, we use it in the gardens. We use it in potting soil, so when we plant plants in a pot, you can use it then. We also sell some of our compost, and some of our compost goes to members of our program. So if you're part of our program and you drop off food scraps, we also provide compost back to you. I do have the bins that people drop off their food scraps. We can shovel food scraps in there. I'd like to also show you another way to mix this. Okay. I just want to show you, this is another mixer. This one is, I think, the most effective mixer to use in these. This one is like a corkscrew, and it pulls up the material much better. Now, the way I'm mixing it is what you would do every day or every time you mix it. When you add the food scraps, you want to pull the material up from the bottom and like turning over the material, right? So let me pause. I'm going to get some food scraps. I'm going to add it to this bin. Okay. Warning. I cannot guarantee that this won't smell. This has food scraps that members of our program drop off. So when people collect at home, I can't control how they store the bucket or how long they keep the bucket. And when they drop it off here, whatever smells they have in their bin, I inherit and I have to manage through the process. So, fair warning, you could, you know. Usually I have a shovel, but sometimes I also just use my hands. I think I'm going to use my hands today. So I could grab my shovel. So, too late. So you can see there's already food scraps and there's a little bit of leaves in here. One way in which I clean my gloves you can smell it? Sorry. That's what happens. Now the good thing is, once you get this mixed, that smell will go away. That'll get cooked down, and by this time tomorrow, there won't be a smell as long as it's hot. As long as it's cooking, the smells get absorbed and they get broken down. Okay? Sorry. So when I add the food scraps into the leaves, I already had a lot of leaves in there. That's why I just added the food scraps. Always add the leaves first and mix the food scraps into the leaves. Yeah, that smells. Sorry. Okay, now once you finish adding the food scraps, as an added measure, put some leaves on top. If you put leaves on top, that keeps everything inside. It also adds a little bit of insulation to keep it warm. And then cover it, and it's good to go for that day. So I add food scraps today. I might add more food scraps tomorrow or the next day. If I don't, at least 3 days from now, I want to turn it again and keep turning it. And it'll take a good solid 2 months to 3 months to break down. And then you also want to let it sit for a little while longer to cure. You want to let it finish with adding no food scraps and no leaves for about 3 months at a minimum. But you still mix it, yeah. So what this is a living pile. It's truly living. There are microorganisms in there that are actively breaking the material down. And it's the microorganisms that produce the heat. They liberate heat in the process of breaking down the food. As long as they're alive and active, they'll continue to metabolize that food scraps. If you stop adding food scraps, over time the pile starts to cool, the temperature starts to go down. Now that's okay. You want to just time it so that you're mixing it while it's still cooling and before it gets too cold that it doesn't break down very quickly. It's a little bit of a science and a little bit of an art. So it takes a little bit of practice to get it right. But within a couple tries, just like cooking, you can pick up the practice and you can even bring in your own understanding of how it works for you. That's the art. The way I compost is going to be very similar to how someone else might compost, but I might do it a little different, or I might find that the number of times I mix it, when I add the food scraps, I might find that a certain schedule works best for me, and you can find that sweet spot that works for you. So remember the science, remember the proportions, remember the mixing frequency, and then figure out the way the process works for you. Do you want to add food scraps over 3 months? Do you want to add food scraps over the entire year and then use it the next year? It all depends if you have a small family or a large family, or maybe you're working with neighbors. It depends on the size of the pile and the amount of time you have. So this style is open to the ground. It's just a box, just an open box with no bottom. Now, I put the hardwood cloth on the bottom, but liquids can still drain into the soil below. Now, if you blend the materials right, if you mix it with the leaves will absorb most of that moisture, if not all of the moisture, and nothing will really drip out. But let's say I'm mixing, it gets cloudy and it starts raining, and I leave and I forget to put the cover on, and it rains and it gets wet. That can produce liquid that could then go into the ground. Because it's small and it's contained, that's probably not an issue, but you want to guard against that. You want to try to keep the liquids inside, but if a little liquid drains out, the reason why you set this up on the ground is the same organisms that do the composting are also in the soil, and they'll help to break down those liquids. The liquid is also nutritional to the microorganisms. It's called leachate, and it will feed the soil too. You do want to try to control it as much as possible, but a little bit of liquid coming through is okay. If anyone would like to add food scraps to this, come on up. You don't have to use your hands, I have a shovel. So this is just for the food scraps. Okay. Perfect, yeah, just put it right in there.
One more or no?
Yeah, you can put a few more if you want. Perfect. Let's mix this, and then we'll talk about storing food scraps at home. So I cook from scratch. I cook all my own food from scratch every day. So when I am making my food, let's say I'm making a stew and I have some carrots, some celery, maybe some potatoes, and I might peel the potatoes. Usually I don't, I like the skins. But the ends of the carrots, the celery, maybe if I'm quartering the chicken, maybe there's some parts I don't eat the neck, and I might not eat the liver, so I might set that aside. And what I do is I have a container that I keep in the fridge. I also keep some in the freezer. And you could do either use a Ziploc bag or a plastic food container that's just for your compost. You could write food scraps on it if you want, but if you know, just keep that all together and keep it in the fridge. And each time you generate food scraps, add to that container until it fills up. Now, because you're storing it in the fridge, it won't spoil so quickly. It should stay nice. It should stay in good shape for at least a couple weeks, just like the food. Sometimes I buy food and it might sit in the fridge for a couple weeks before I actually use it all. And you do the same thing with your food scraps and they'll stay in good shape. Sometimes people collect it and they keep it on their counter or they keep it outside on their deck or their porch. If you keep it at room temperature, if it's warm, that's when the mold gets in there, that's when it starts to smell. So you can strategize to keep those odors down by keeping it in the fridge or the freezer. At home, if it's vegetables, perfectly fine. If it's meat that isn't cooked, you have to be really careful. You have to know what you're doing to compost meat scraps at home. The best option until you gain the skills, until you're a master composter, is to drop off your meat scraps at a place like my place, because I can take meat scraps and I compost in my large system over there. At home, you really have to get good at it to compost the meat. To compost meat at home, you need the heat. You have to get it hot. So we need those hot temperatures. Now that takes good timing because when you stop adding food scraps, after a few days, it starts to cool down. So you have to time it that you add, if you have meat scraps, you have to add it while it's hot, and then you have to keep it hot. So you have to keep adding a little leaves, a little food scraps, a little leaves. Now, it's not too much to learn that, but it takes a little bit of time. I like to use the analogy of cooking because cooking is both simple, but it's also challenging to be really good at it. And I know this. I grew up with my mom cooking from scratch, and I learned from her how to time things so we made a good meal. It's the same thing with the composting. Ultimately, it comes down to the timing of everything. But once you get that down, it's pretty straightforward and it's predictable. It works every time if you follow the same process. If you follow the same rules, you get the same results. So I'd like to also show people the large system that I use over here. Is that okay? Do you want to see that? I mean, I pretty much showed you everything you need to do and talk through the process. But if you'd like to see the larger system that I use for composting, it's similar, but it's a little more intense. And it's a larger bins. So if anyone wants to move down that way, I'm just going to take some of these tools and I'll show you how I start a pile. We compost in these bins. There's 12 of them, And if you want to open up number 3, you can look inside. So these are at different stages of composting, and we keep them in here because these are really well contained. And you can also see it has an insulation that helps to hold in the heat. I also arrange them so they're side by side and front to back to share the heat that's produced by all of them. So this whole system heats up. This one's new. So this one, sorry, there's some flies, but I just put this in today. Sorry. But what I do, I add leaves first. So remember, when you compost, start off with the leaves. Now, I add some food scraps, and I'm going to tell you my secret on how to get this started. Just like when you start a fire, you have some kindling. You have a little bit of wood that you start the fire with to get the rest of the fire going. So to get this going, yeah, cool, thank you. Yep, add a little more. So this is an active compost pile next to it. You can see a little bit of heat. There's some heat coming up. But when you take active compost, those microbes are alive and they're thriving. And they'll get into this bin and heat that up. And within 1 day, you'll get up to the composting temperatures that you need to really break the food scraps down. So once I add the leaves, I add the food scraps, I add a little bit of active compost, and then I do the same thing, I mix it. And this is how you get a pile started. Like everything else, you can buy it on Amazon.
How do you call it?
This is called an auger, compost auger. I can send a list of resources so that everyone can get this. I'll email this to the organizers of what you need, and then also you can contact me, and I'll answer any questions. For any equipment you need, any help, I'll be available. I added food scraps to this bin, I think it's been 5 days. And if you look at it, it's all broken down already. So when you have a bin that's hot, it accelerates that process, and the food scraps break down very quickly. What's usually left over, what's usually slow, is stuff that's fibrous. So like the leaves, avocado pits, and the avocado rind, the shell.
So that's why you use the screen over there just to check.
Yes, and that's how we screen it. Yep. So you can continue that process for quite a long time. But it's always the fibrous stuff that's going to take the longest to break down. Anytime you mix, you want to try to mix the whole thing. Now we're just demonstrating it today, so when you don't have to. It's not your pile specifically, but when I mix, I always try to mix everything. So whenever I add food scraps, I get it all mixed in. It's a little bit of an art, but when you don't see any more food scraps, and the fibrous stuff like the leaves are mostly broken down. And then it's close to being ready. Now, we have one more stage in the process. That's called the curing stage. The curing stage helps all that fibrous material break down. The sticks, the little sticks, the last of the leaves, some of the avocado pits, those take a little longer. Now, you can finish the compost and all the rest of the food scrap is gone and have some of those avocado pits or leaves still breaking down. So it might be a little more mulchy, a little more chunky. It gets to the point where the material looks richer. It looks more broken down than it looks more like food scraps. And you'll also notice that the material holds itself together. So as the material matures, it will form a ball more easily. When it's fresh, you really can't form, like a dirt ball with it. Yeah. But it's a little bit of like, that's where the art comes in. And as you manage the pile, you can kind of recognize, oh, this is almost done. But also you'll notice like most of the leaves are broken down, most of the sticks are broken down. So, but yeah, it could be 6 weeks to 2 months. Now here's the thing. When you add leaves and you add the food scraps, and over time it's breaking down, it's also shrinking in size. So so it gets much smaller. So you can continue to add and continue to add more than you would think you could add because it keeps breaking down. So I'd like to show you the curing pile. If we want to move over here, I'll show you the curing pile. Right? So this is why we do this. This is almost done. This is about sometime in September. I put these here. Yeah, so I would say probably the beginning of September is when I put this one, and then like every couple of weeks I've added another. So earthworms. So we put the compost in here to allow it to sit and allow stuff like, oh wow, a wooden spoon. That might take a little longer, but that's okay. Ribs, bones. Sometimes these break apart pretty easy. So that's all good calcium, right, from the bones. So I let it sit in here to really finish the material. The reason we do this is you want it stable. So when you go to use this for growing plants, you want to make sure it's not too hot or it's too active. And when you add it to the soil, you want it to be available for the plants slowly. You want the nutrients to return to the soil, but do so slowly. And that's best for the plants. This also allows other microorganisms like fungi to grow in here. There are certain soil fungi that are really important for plants. And they only grow when it's cooler. They don't grow in the hot part of the compost. They'll only really develop when it's sitting still. So when it's in here, I don't mix it. I just let it sit. And this will sit until the springtime. And then I'll start harvesting it. And this, I might take this and I might sift it. I have a sifter So I might sift it, but you can use this directly. This is fine to add right to your garden, especially outside. Just more, I put like this piece of plastic over it, just to keep mainly the leaves off of it. At this stage, it's not as important. The air isn't as critical. It just needs to sit. This is where it cures. You still want the balance of moisture in the finished compost. And by covering it, I can control that moisture. So I actually periodically come here with a watering can and I'll water these. That's why you can see they're pretty moist looking. So I add about 1 watering can once a week. And then I keep it covered and then I'll come and check it. Most of these have cooled down completely. So once they cool down completely, they don't lose too much moisture. So if I keep it covered, it'll stay fairly moist. But if I get a lot of wind coming through here and there's no rain, that can still dry these out. So that's why I have to keep checking them. But yeah, you want a balance of moisture. Too much, you got to let it drain through, and not enough, it can just sort of stop the composting process. When it snows, one thing, I just will let the snow stay on top of it. Because I have plastic over it, it'll just, melt off, or it'll just sit on there until it warms up and melts. But that's okay, because at this stage, I really want the fungal component to grow. And the cold doesn't really inhibit them. They'll continue to break down the material over the winter. It's a slow process. That's why it takes anywhere from 3 months to a year to finish. But I don't mind the snow. Sometimes I will put like a insulating blanket over it just to protect the earthworms. So I might do that before it gets to the winter. I might cover it with the insulating blanket just to keep enough warmth in there so the worms survive the winter. Thank you, everybody. If you don't have any more questions, you're welcome to still stay. You can look in any of the bins. You can check out the compost here. If you have other questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I'll leave my contact information, and we'll make sure you get your questions answered and you get the resources that you need.